Sun feels like gold on my skin. I win another day to begin with my friends. Chasing the bag with a grin. Are you in? Let's do this for real, don't pretend. It's a better future. It's no surprise. I'm seeing it all in your eyes. Yeah, we're glowing real bright. It's a better future. As clear as the sky. I know if you're down to ride, then we'll be fine. It's a better future. What's next? What you want? What's next? What you want? What's next? What you want? What's next?
Hi, my name is Kirsten Greenwich, and I am the Mellon Foundation playwright in residence here at Company One Theater. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you all so much for joining us.
And I'm Ilana Brownstein, Director of New Work at C1. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Welcome to Better Future Voting Rights, a project of C1's new Play Lab in collaboration with our connectivity programming.
We're going to provide descriptions of ourselves in these Zoom boxes to support access for anyone who is blind, low vision, or otherwise might not be able to see the video clearly. I'm a middle-aged Black woman with medium brown skin and black straightened hair with red and brown highlights. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm also wearing a black and white gingham dress with short sleeves. Behind me is a brown wicker divider that is also a bookshelf.
And I'm a 40s-ish white woman with my hair up, wearing a white linen shirt over a joyful floral dress. I have glasses, and I'm using headphones. My background is a blurry gray wash.
Before we get started, we would like to begin by acknowledging that Company One Theater produces work in Boston, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Massachusetts people. It is important to understand and honor the history of the Indigenous land that we occupy and recognize this acknowledgement is insufficient and does not undo the harm against Indigenous people. We continue to take small steps toward a more just future. Thank you.
We're here today to explore civic issues facing immigrant communities, disabled communities, and elder communities of Boston on the eve of a historic mayoral election that will see a woman of color in that seat for the first time in the city's history.
You're going to see short plays by members of our current Vote Lab for pre-professional writers, as well as some guest writers from past labs. Projects like Better Future Voting Rights allow us to offer micro commissions to civically engaged artists who are writing responsibly on social issues. The Vote Lab is part of our larger C1 Play Lab circuit, which provides creative and professional development to writers at all stages of their careers.
For Voting Rights, each playwright received a thematic prompt connected to a specific voting block in Boston, and they were given access to images, articles, and other resources related to important issues within those communities.
We'll be joined by special guests and partner organizations during the program who will offer some real-world context about the themes in each play. And because Company One Theater is all about taking action alongside the art, our connectivity team has put together some great ways for you to take action alongside us so that we can actualize the better future we are all so desperately need.
Well, let's dive in. Without further ado, we give you Better Future Voting Rights.
I Stand Here in Line by Ken Green, Thato R. Moasa, and Catherine Stewart. Tuesday, September 14th, 8:10 a.m., a polling place in Boston. There is a line. 3 people, Sean, Masa, and Fiona, stand in various states of anticipation.
Are you serious with this line? Why is it so long? It's just putting an X in a box, people. 4 years they've had to get this stuff together. People are acting like...
It's my first time. Not my first time, but this is my first time as an American. Yeah, I'm an American. It still feels strange to say. Do you think I'll lose my accent?
The first time I voted in my life was in February of 1995, back in my country. I stood in line for hours under the scorching sun. It was a long line like this one. The line snaked through my village. We wanted change. when we were willing to risk losing our jobs just so we could vote.
20 more minutes and then I'm leaving. I cannot be late to work again. I got up early just for this. I should be able to run in, do this thing on the train, be at work on time, boom, boom, boom. Come on. We've done this before, right? We're Americans.
Maybe I'm not American. Not really. I'm a citizen, a naturalized citizen, but I still want to spell it with an S, not a Z. Naturalised. So that probably means I'm not really American, right?
They say Americans don't like to discuss politics. The people in the line are rather quiet. They barely speak to each other. But they say, don't ask people who they are voting for. I guess that is what it means to be American. It is so different in my country. There, when we stand in line to vote, we greet one another. We chat. We sing praise songs.
No, it's not my first time. I've voted since I was 16, back home. I can post my vote even if I can't get home.
Shouldn't we be good at this by now? They hold these things like every year. Okay, not every year, but you start seeing all the TV commercials. You know it's time to vote.
I saw the commercials. There are a lot of women running. They say it's the year of the women. Oh, one of the women running doesn't like immigrants. She says immigrants steal jobs. She doesn't know who I am. I work hard. I will not vote for her. I'll vote for the other one. She seems nicer. She says nice things like immigrants enrich this country. It's true.
I'm gonna lower your taxes, end government waste, give all the stray dogs a home. You know, the usual stuff.
I've not missed a vote. Not that every election has gone the way I'd hoped. It's the least I can do.
It's so disappointing when elections don't go our way. I hope I'll not get disappointed like the last time I voted in my country. The dictator stole our votes. He has stayed in power for 30 years, and now his son is poised to take over. In my country, the corrupt politicians lie to us every year, and once you vote for them, they don't keep their promises. They only fatten their pockets. Here in America, they say politicians are honest. That's why America is the greatest country in the world.
You listen, you pick the person that looks like they know what they're talking about or looks the best. Boom, you vote for them.
I hope the woman I vote for today wins. She believes that healthcare and education is a right. Oh, I like her. She's not like the corrupt politicians in my country that make empty promises as they do every election year.
It's been a long time since I actually lived there. I don't really know which place to call home.
I overheard my colleague saying that he will vote for the other woman who says immigrants are a problem. Does it mean that he hates me, Maricela and Abdul?
I'm not really there, and I'm not fully here either. Not yet, anyway.
What's the hold up? Some of us got to get to work, make money, pay taxes. Just pick somebody.
I've paid taxes since I arrived, so it's only fair that I get to vote. The green card just allowed me to have residency here, that's all. I too, like many Americans, pay my taxes, but I couldn't vote until I became a citizen. With this vote, I will feel like a real American now. I guess the ballot will look the same. I don't want to get this wrong.
Seriously, I don't know why it would take so long. Just run down the list. Check, check, check.
I missed several elections here because I only had a green card.
To become an American, there is a long test that one must pass. I learned about the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the legislative branch. They don't want to give you citizenship for free. It's hard work. The benefit is being able to stand here and exercise my right to vote.
Look, I know voting is important.
You can't vote if you only have a green card.
Now that I can say I'm American, I feel I have a real voice.
I mean, it's like a civic duty and everything.
Everyone in this country has a voice. Some voices are louder, some quieter.
Come on, let's be serious.
The politicians make a lot of promises, don't they?
When has voting ever really changed anything?
Can you imagine free healthcare? If millions make their voices heard, that may very well happen.
I mean, as far as I can see, the past 4 or 5 years, no different than any other time.
One politician even promised free college education. She said she will erase student debt. This will change my life. I have to believe it. I pay thousands every month just to pay for my grad school loans.
You know, I spent 15 minutes trying to find my polling place. They keep moving it every year, and they don't give you time off from work for this, you know?
One politician said they will build a tall wall to keep the immigrants out. As he spoke, people cheered. I was confused. I mean, didn't immigrants build this country? What is the difference between somebody who came here 200 years ago and somebody who came here just 10 years ago? Isn't immigration what makes America great?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. That's my voting system. I mean, why not? How am I supposed to know all those people?
I will vote for someone who will protect my rights as a citizen. I will vote for someone who sees me. I mean, really sees and hears me.
This is, I can't. Okay, you know what?
I stand here in line,
I'm out, gone. I don't have time for this.
waiting to cast my vote in America for the first time.
I don't want to get it wrong or make a mistake because
I know my vote means power. I know my vote will be counted.
well, even if I don't feel like a real American, I know my vote will be counted.
I know my vote matters.
I'm doing this for all the people who can't, who aren't allowed.
Does it matter?
End of play.
All right. Hi, my name is Allison Chu. I use she or they pronouns. I'm the connectivity producer of Company One Theater. So to give you a little visual descriptor, I'm a 24-year-old queer person of Chinese descent. I have short black hair with bangs. I'm wearing a blue striped shirt. I'm sitting in front of a white wall with a little small bookshelf right above my head. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Angela and Kevin from Asian American Resource Workshop. So Angela and Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself along with a little visual descriptor as well? Feel free to start us off, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin, Kevin Lam. I use here, they pronouns. I'm the organizing director with the Asian American Resource Workshop, ARW, and then, yeah, a visual description. Yeah, I'm a 31-year-old queer Lao Viet person, and yeah, have a buzz cut, and sitting in my living room in front of a black couch.
Go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Angela Chang. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the immigrant rights organizing fellow at Asian American Resource Workshop. And some visual descriptor, I'm a 23-year-old Chinese American who has like a side bang, and I have like a Zoom office background, and also wearing like a black t-shirt.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So first, I would like just to uplift ARW's work in helping Boston Dorchester area API immigrants, and just also especially the work in uniting young activists in these community in these areas. The work is truly, truly substantial. So first, I was curious about if Kevin, could you tell us a little bit about some of the bigger frameworks of your advocacy and mission around immigrant voting rights? And also, Angela, please feel free to jump in whenever.
Yeah, I can share. I think if it's helpful, I can share context about ARW, who we are as an organization, and yeah,
Absolutely.
broader how we approach our work. Cool. Yeah, so ARW, we were founded in 1979. So we've been around for a little bit over 40 years now, and over this past decade have really shifted to become more of an organizing and movement building organization that really works alongside and builds up the leadership and organizing of youth and young adults, particularly within the Asian American Greater Boston area. And so, yeah, a lot of the issues that we organize on really focus on issue-based and neighborhood-based organizing is really from a anti-displacement framework. So really organizing around issues of housing justice, immigration, policing, surveillance, criminalization, and then some work around environmental justice. So that's kind of like a brief overview of, about like just more about our work. And yeah, our office is based in Fields Corner in Dorchester. And I would say that in terms of like some of our immigration work, yeah, I think we really started to do more issue-based organizing around immigration, in particular in 2017. And so it was really in response to an increase in the detentions and deportations that we were seeing take place within the Vietnamese community in Dorchester. And this was under the past like presidential administration. And so, the Trump administration. And so, given kind of what we were seeing with the increase in detention and deportations, and given where ARW's office is based and our priority around organizing with Southeast Asian youth, young adults, and with the community to really invest in their leadership, also felt called to really respond to the issue of deportation. And so, I think a part of it around that work is really addressing kind of the displacement that we're seeing where folks are facing detention and deportation, being torn apart from their loved ones, their families. So when we're talking about displacement, just like the forcible removal of people from like their communities, their homes, yeah, places that their neighborhoods, cities, and things like that. And so, I think for us really seeing like deportation as a form of displacement that we've been seeing in our communities. And yeah, I think I can pass it to Angela to share a little bit more about like kind of more around some of our undocumented immigrant organizing work and kind of more around your question too.
Yeah, I think my current work with the undocumented immigrants is focused on organizing the undocumented Asian youth and young adult group in Boston, and being able to talk to staff, faculties, and schools to develop support and also advocacy for undocumented students in Massachusetts schools. And I think around some of like the advocacy and mission around voting rights that you were mentioning. As Kevin mentioned earlier, our programs and organizing are around issue based. So we do a lot of political educations and workshops and also different events to that yeah attracts a lot of young adults and youth to learn more about the different issues that is happening around our community. And through those events, we're able to like raise more awareness on yeah the different issues that are affecting our community, and also the different things that are affecting the vulnerable members in our communities. And yeah, and in those ways we were able to yeah, set up like phone banks or action hours for a lot of our members and also other young activists or leaders to participate and yeah, being able to raise awareness on voting and yeah, like bring out more voters in the community.
Yeah, wow. I'm really excited to hear that. I'm really excited to hear about the opportunities and the space that you set up to not only to talk to the community, but also let the community to sort of through workshops and all the other pathways to talk back at you and create that dialogue around voting rights and some of the issues that they're facing as well. So in this year's mayoral election, Boston's really excited to see a cohort of diverse candidates bring out new policies in response to city's current concerns. So I'm really excited to and curious to hear this from y'all. What would you say are some of the policies that matters the most to our immigrant and refugee communities?
Yeah, jump on this one and if Kevin wants to add. Yeah. I think some of the policies and legislations that we're more focused on are the Municipal ID and the Working Family and Mobility Act. We think that it's important for our immigrant community to be able to have access to driver's license or identification cards. It's the best way for them to have yeah, ways to access services or even being able to travel safely without being stopped by ICE or any law enforcement. I think it definitely helps with public safety and also it's something that's being brought out in different states across the US as well. So it's important for, yeah, for us to be also be supporting on that cause as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, I can add a little bit. I think, yeah, in terms of, I think both to your earlier question around like voting rights, especially for immigrant communities, I think, right, I think it's, and also about like what are the policies at the city level that are really important for immigrant communities right now. I think, right, when we talk about immigration, oftentimes it's seen as like a federal issue. And so like, I think really thinking through what can be done at like the city or state level around immigration to support like folks in our communities. And so, I think echoing what Angela shared around, these are like the focus areas that we've seen over the past few years that have been really important around driver's license, like municipal IDs. And then I think also what we've really seen over this past year during the pandemic is, a lot of folks who were hardest hit by the impact of COVID-19 were like immigrant communities and like small businesses. And so, through the work of ARW, along with other Asian American organizations, like really setting up this emergency relief fund to support like immigrant communities, undocumented Asian communities, in particular around like accessing like direct needs and like services, where folks are facing food insecurity, housing insecurity, job insecurity, and things like that. And so, I think at the city level is, I think another part of it is really making sure like the funding and resources actually goes back into like community-based orgs working directly with like immigrant communities, and to like folks who are hardest hit or really impacted by these issues.
Yes, yes, definitely all of that. And it is so important for that those needs, specific needs to be heard, I think. And I especially thinking about for the community's needs to be heard, I'm thinking about the accessibility, especially the access to letting our voice out and really to be able to let the city hear what our community's needs are. So I guess I'm also curious about, I guess in the past few years, what is the biggest barrier you've seen within the AARW community when it comes to the advocacy of getting out the vote? Angela, would you like to tell us first, start off with that?
Yeah, I think some of the barriers we've been seeing is definitely language access. Especially like when there's no staff, poll staff, staff members at the poll centers that are able to speak the language of the community members, or even documents or materials that are able to like illiterate like the language that the community members are speaks. And I think that creates a large barrier for our immigrant community to vote on certain policies or issues, or even the candidates that they care about. Um, and I think another thing is, yeah, the voter ID requirement. Um, and, I think it impact the, yeah, I think it impact the immigrant community a lot on the voter ID requirement, and that kind of goes back to why we want to focus on the municipal ID and the driver's license bills.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. And finally, I wanted just to take a moment to connect the work that we're talking about and our dialogue back to the play that we just saw, and to talk about a really important moment in the play itself that really stood out to me personally. So at the end of the play, one of the characters, her name's Fiona, who's an immigrant and a recently naturalized citizen. She's casting her vote for the very first time after holding green card for many years, and she stood in the line to cast her vote, and she says, I'm doing this for all the people who can't, who aren't allowed. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the context of that line maybe, and sort of specifically the immigrant community that aren't allowed to vote. um, Kevin, would you like to start us off?
Can I toss it to Angela first?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, as I was kind of thinking about this question, I was thinking in the broad sense that it's undocumented community that are not allowed to vote in ballots or in any of the elections because they don't have a status that allows them to vote. But while we want like those who could vote to go out to like vote and being able to have their voices heard, we also want to like emphasize that like it's important to have our undocumented community to be able to vote, as they're a part of the community. And yeah, they do a lot for the community. They work, they're essential workers, their families, um they're important members of our community that should be allowed to voice their opinions. Their right, yeah, it's their right to be able to have a voice, have an opinion on what is happening around the community, the state, the national level. Um, and as I was thinking more about this question, I think it also includes those who who's not able to access um, the information on what's happening, the policies, the different things that are happening. And yeah, that pertains to some of the questions that we talked about before about language access, where yeah, some people are not familiar with what's going on with the elections because there's no materials or um, or resources that are able to inform them of what's happening in the state or national level. So yeah, I think that's like two of the things that I was like thinking about while I was like thinking through this question.
I think, you know, given this conversation around just like civic engagement, voting within immigrant communities, right? I think to Angela's earlier point, yeah, unfortunately, not everyone is allowed to or able to vote because of like their status, right? And I think we don't believe that that is something that should remain, and that actually folks who live here and are, you know, when it comes to like voting and like on different forms of legislation or initiatives and things like that, I think, right, the impact, it also impacts like immigrant communities and documented communities. And so there should be a stake and like a voice that like undocumented communities have, and through like the civic engagement and voting process. But that at least within ARW, we also see like voting as like one tool or one strategy to push for like change. And so, right, the other piece of it is really organizing with folks who are impacted by these issues as well, where folks may not be able to vote, but really through like, you know, building grassroots power and collective power, really pushing like specifically on decision makers, folks who actually could really impact people's lives in different communities on various issues that we're organizing around. So I think a part of it is to like folks who are really interested in like really organizing and really engaging in like some of the ways we think about like how organizing is connected to like civic engagement and voting. Yeah, we're always happy to connect and plug people into ways to get or do stuff with ARW. So
That is amazing. That is amazing. Thank you so much for all of the resources that you just put out there. I would like to also point people to AARW's website, aarw.org, to check out what's going on in their ongoing work. And Kevin and Angela, thank you so much for sharing and joining us today.
Heartbeats in the Room by Fabiola R. Decius and Zara A. Bellier. Alex, Zion, and Riley are reporters with a local paper working on an open investigation using paired testing or auditing to assess the Boston housing market. Alex and Zion are in the middle of a conversation in a Zoom meeting.
These photos are beautiful. There's so many amenities.
Yeah, I know. I would actually love living here. I mean, there's a supermarket nearby, the library, the bank, and public transportation is accessible too.
Too bad there aren't any apartments available.
You mean for us?
Based on what we've seen today, for people like us.
Well, do you think it would have made a difference if we came in separately?
No, I feel like the response would have been the same if it were only you or only me, but with both of us coming in together looking for an apartment, that probably exacerbated their concerns. Maybe with the next one, we should try
I
to.
mean, it's 2021. This shouldn't still be happening.
You're right. And that's why this investigation is so important.
Did they give you an application?
Wow.
Of course they did.
Don't get too discouraged. They told me the same thing they told you. There aren't any apartments available at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, meaning they're still interested in you possibly applying in the future.
Meanwhile, they didn't even want me to use their restroom.
Yeah, but that was because it was out of order.
No, it wasn't. My contacts were irritating me, so I asked if I could use it, and the leasing agent walked me down the hall. It was to the left of the office next to the fitness center. It's an interesting point for us to test as well with the remaining apartments.
I'll ask to use the bathroom and then you should do the same. And then we'll compare the management company's interactions with us. Are we going to release the housing development's names in our article?
I don't think we should, but our report will indicate that we sampled several housing communities in Boston and we'll release the findings. I think the goal should be to get people talking about this, especially in the upcoming election. Finding housing is already a difficult process, but when you have certain groups of people facing discrimination too, well, that needs to be addressed.
Alex and I are part of the last group in this investigation, right?
Yes. The first group tested was same-sex couples and transgender individuals as prospective tenants. Bob Brandon and Nigeria ran lead on that group.
What were their findings?
There was discrimination against gay men and transgender people, but lesbians and heterosexual women were treated comparably. The second group tested families with children, but they were not necessarily refused housing. However, they were steered toward larger apartments, which is more costly and often less available.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I remember my family had to move out of our 2-bedroom apartment once my mom had my baby sister. My brother and I were sharing a room and they said they could only be 2 people per bedroom.
Ugh, I've heard of that. It's called the 2 heartbeats per room rule.
And it's actually per bedroom. So since I was the oldest, my parents decided that I could sleep in the living room and my brother and sister could share the room. But, they had issues with that too. They said we'd have to move into the 3-bedroom. So my parents had to take on extra jobs to afford it. I mean, it's crazy, right?
I thought HUD enacted new residential occupancy standards with 2+1 rule, which allows tenants to have at least 3 people per bedroom. Otherwise, it's considered familial status discrimination.
Well, what about the findings for discrimination based on race? Wasn't there supposed to be a group that focused on that?
That group said there are significant levels of discrimination against racial and ethnic minorities, including Black and African Americans, Latinx.
As people of color, we're actually the majority, not the minority.
Touche.
Zion, that group decided that instead of focusing solely on housing, they would work on a summary report comparing 2021 numbers to those of the 2017 Spotlight report.
That makes sense.
Right, but that also brings up the point that all of us in groups 1, 2, and 3 are going to need to work on an instrument that can distinguish the variables inherent in the intersectionality of these models we created. Like, for example, I am a Black person with a disability. So would I have been offered the apartment if I weren't disabled? I think we need to go back to the race group. I mean, yeah, we need to find a better name to categorize them and maybe see if we can keep their initial findings for our report. What do you guys think?
You bring up a good case, Zion. Yeah, we should circle back to Teddy's group and have a longer conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so when do we meet up with the other members of the PWD group so that we can compare notes?
The PWD.
Really, Riley? PWD, people with disabilities.
Right. I knew that.
Yeah, right.
Right, so when is the meeting? Wait, I wrote it down. Okay, Friday at 2 p.m.
Yeah, we divided the parts of the city and the different neighborhoods amongst the groups, but there was one group that overlapped. They were the control group. So besides comparing how each neighborhood fared, it's going to be interesting to see where the similarities lie in the overlapping areas of the map.
Okay, team, which communities remain? And don't forget, we need to add in the restroom question. Riley, when you call Nigeria, you should see if their group would be interested in adding the restroom variable.
Will do. So to recap, what are our action steps before we meet with the rest of the PWD?
Nice.
I'm learning. With the PWD group on Friday.
I'm going to review the list of the last 10 locations. So, well, for 5, I know we need to make appointments, so I'll set those up online tonight.
Okay, I'm going to transcribe all the notes from the last 2 days and add them to the Dropbox by tomorrow afternoon.
My task is to reach back out to Teddy's group about the notes and stats they collected to see if they can share.
I will also check in with the other point people in the PWD group to see if they need help setting up appointments, and since I'll have to do it for us tonight anyway.
Who's the stat person assigned to this report?
Murray
Alvarez.
Great, thanks. I will also reach out to Murray so that we can get started on the intersectionality instrument.
Of course you will. Whoopee, math.
Hey, don't make fun because you flunked middle school algebra in college.
Wow.
I would call foul, but it's true.
Okay, future award-winning journalists. I am starving. I think we should call it a night.
Agreed. Alex, do you use DoorDash or Uber Eats? I feel like sometimes the toss-up.
DoorDash is more expensive, but I think they pay their drivers better, so I usually go with them. I'm thinking about ordering from Committee on Northern Avenue. You guys want to join me? We have a great outdoor space behind my apartment. Chairs 6 feet apart. We're all vaccinated, right?
Committee sounds great. Why don't I pick up the orders for us on the way over?
Oh, thank you. I'm definitely in the mood for a falafel.
Great. Text me what you want and I can order for the 3 of us. Don't forget your masks and I will provide the hand sanitizer.
All right, beautiful people. See you there.
I'll meet you there. Falafel.
See ya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Baxter. I am the development manager and creative producer at Company One, and I'm so glad to be joined today by Sandy and Colin. I will share that my pronouns are she, hers, and I am a 33-year-old white woman. Today, I have my kind of dirty blonde hair down. I'm wearing red glasses and a navy striped shirt. And I'm in my office / guest room. So there's a bed behind me and 2 windows. Before we dive in to the meat of the conversation, there's so much we are going to talk about. I will turn it over to Sandy and Colin to introduce themselves. Sandy, why don't you start?
Sure. So happy to be here. Thank you. My name is Sandy Ho. My pronouns are she, her. I am a disabled Asian American woman, queer. I have dark, wavy, shoulder length hair, and I'm wearing a vest white button up. Behind me is a blurred Zoom background, and also our Zoom YouTube audience isn't able to see, but I do use a wheelchair.
Colin, go for it.
Great. My name is Colin Killick. I use he, him pronouns. I am a bisexual cisgender man. Like I think one of the characters in this play, I am invisibly disabled. I have neuromotor disorder called motor dysgraphia, as well as executive function disorder and depression. I'm a white man in my early 30s with sort of medium length curly light brown hair and glasses, wearing a white shirt and sitting in front of a bookshelf. And I'm executive director of Disability Policy Consortium. We are a civil rights advocacy and research organization based in Greater Boston, operating statewide, run by and for people with disabilities. More than 85% of our staff, including myself and every member of our management team, has a disability. And our credo is about us, by us. If you've heard nothing about us without us, this is sort of taking that one step further. It's the idea that when decisions are made about people with disabilities, it must be people with disabilities taking the lead in making those decisions.
Yeah, Sandy, do you want to jump off of that and share a little bit about what brings you to this conversation?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm here today from, I guess, 2 perspectives. Firstly, I'm the co-organizer and also have the privilege of being the founder of the Disability and Intersectionality Summit, which is a biennial community space that is organized by disabled activists from across the country. And all of our presenters are also marginalized disabled people of color, predominantly, and also they also identify as queer, LGBTQ, trans. I'm also here today as the research project manager of the Community Living Policy Center, which is housed at the Lurie Institute for Disability Policy at Brandeis University campus. The Community Living Policy Center, which we are proud to have the Disability Policy Consortium as one of our partners, is a national center, research center that focuses on exactly what it sounds like, policies that keep and help keep people with disabilities in their homes and communities rather than being institutionalized.
Thanks, Sandy. So I think maybe, Colin, we can start with you and you can share a bit about sort of what DPC's legislative priorities are as it relates to housing and kind of what the landscape of that looks like at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So housing is a serious problem. I think maybe the most serious problem facing people with disabilities at the moment. Our community is more than twice as likely to be homeless as those without disabilities, and has the added problem for people with disabilities that if they cannot find housing that is both affordable and meets their access needs, they are sometimes forced into institutions. Before COVID-19, we knew that living in institutions was demeaning, entailed a loss of agency and control and entailed segregation from the community. During the pandemic, we also found out that it was too often deadly. So making sure that folks can live in the community is critical, and for that you need 2 things. They need a means of affording the housing, and there has to be housing that meets their needs. For that first part, we co-run, along with the Boston Center for Independent Living, a project called the Housing Advocacy Leadership Team, or HALT. And every year, HALT in the budget process advocates for increased funds for the Alternative Housing Voucher Program. This is a state mobile housing voucher, which is provided to low-income people with disabilities under 65 and can be used on any unit in the state that meets that is under a maximum rent. And in the last 7 years, we have grown funding for that program from $3.45 million to $14.2 million, which has enabled well over 1,000 people with disabilities to find that housing that meets their needs, as well as increasing the rent cap. So advocating for AHVP when next year's budget, the 22 and 22 budget rolls around, is critical. The other piece, and the one people can do right now, is there needs to be accessible housing for people to move into. Massachusetts has some of the oldest housing stock in the country, therefore the least accessible, and the units that are accessible tend to be in newly constructed luxury high-rise apartment buildings, which are among the most expensive. And a critical cause of this shortage is that while state law requires that in newly constructed apartment buildings, all of the units are at least adaptable, meaning that they could be made accessible without major structural changes. If a building is being renovated, even if it is being turned from a factory into an apartment building, say, even if everything but the facade is being torn down, that is a renovation, that is not new construction. And so 95% of the units in that building can remain completely inaccessible to people who have physical disabilities. And so we're trying to pass 2 bills that would fix that. It's H2420 in the House, S1629 in the Senate, an act building a more accessible Massachusetts, which would close that loophole and would say that when buildings are buildings are converted into multifamily housing developments, that they will have to meet those adaptability requirements so that people with disabilities can find housing, so that people who become disabled can age in place or stay in place, and our community can be safe and integrated with the wider society.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what Colin began with by saying that housing is one of the most critical issues right now for the disability community. I want to underscore that by adding that housing and the experiences of homelessness are also, examples of the ways ableism functions. And I think that, from as the community organizer perspective, where our conference and community space really is based around the principles of disability justice, which is a framework of 10 principles. And I would encourage folks to check out Sins Invalid. But 2 of those 10 principles include cross-movement solidarity and collective access. And so how does this relate to housing? I think when we talk about cross-movement solidarity and disability justice, I've often heard the term allyship being thrown around a lot. And while that's certainly necessary in cross-movement and coalition building, allyship alone isn't enough. And I think the reason why intersectionality is important in this discussion is because it helps us to really determine and identify who is holding the power and where can power be built, and the paths and bridges that coalitions can come together to create and expand access to things like housing. And so an example of cross-movement solidarity in the context of disability and LGBTQ work is to recognize that, yes, healthcare access is certainly a challenge and a barrier that disabled people have been experiencing since eternity, but also recognizing that within our communities and in our population, we also have trends towards disabled. We also have, people who are experiencing other forms of systemic oppression besides and in addition to their disability.
Absolutely. And it's important to note too that these things also interconnect, because other forms of identity often lead to higher rates of other forms of oppression, often lead to disability, right? Transgender people, for instance, about 20% of the whole population identify as having a disability. Among transgender people, that's 39%, right? Almost twice that, which makes sense because disabilities come from trauma and marginalization. And one area, Sandy, to your excellent point, where these things intersect is we think about barriers to housing that are physical, and some of that is intersectional, right? I mean, in communities of color, where buildings are the least likely to have had been well maintained, right? The least likely to have elevator, that kind of investment, right? And the double bind people are put in of accessible or affordable, pick one, right? Because the buildings that get renovated to have the elevator put in, the rents then go up before people can afford it. But actually, one of the biggest forces that's keeping people out of housing is discrimination against those with mental health diagnoses. And this is discrimination not only by individual landlords, but by housing authorities, by both the state as a whole and Boston Housing Authority have quotas on the percent of people under age 65, disabled people under age 65, who can live in elderly disabled housing. And I was part of, fairly early in my career as a community organizer, one of those fights, and when Boston was trying to put this quota in place, and it was all based on fear mongering around people with mental health diagnoses.
Sandy, I wonder if this is a good moment to kind of pivot to talk a little bit about the report that you led around civic engagement and people with disabilities, and to kind of expand out a little bit, leave housing to the side for a moment, and just talk about some of the barriers that exist within the community when it comes to civic participation more broadly.
Sure, absolutely. So this is a project that was funded by the Ford Foundation Civic Engagement and Government Program a few years ago. And this was something that we were looking to better understand the ways that people with disabilities experience civic engagement and pathways to democracy. When I say those words, just anybody on the street, civic engagement, democracy, like the first things that come to mind is often voting. Like that is one of the basic, most fundamental activities, and it sort of represents civic engagement. However, when we were embarking on this project, I kind of had a hunch that knowing the disability rights history movement, the independent living movement, that the definition or the kind of embodiment of civic engagement for disabled people and non-disabled people are likely going to be strikingly different, right? So when we have a community and population of disabled people who, have continued to be since the 60s and 70s and prior to that, and even today now, are relegated to institutions, are not given access to housing, to education, to access to public transportation. And then, the idea that voting booths would be accessible to this community is kind of misaligned. And so when we were doing this project, where we interviewed disabled people and also conducted a survey that resulted in 360 responses from people in the US who self-identified as having a disability, just asking them what were the ways in which civic engagement was something that they interacted with and engaged with in their own lives. Many of the people that I talked to, unsurprisingly, I think to me said, I didn't really sign up to become civically engaged or to become an advocate. And advocacy, whether it was through access to their classroom, to college, to their first job, was really kind of their on-ramp to civic engagement. And, the personal is political, that phrasing comes to mind. And we also had a Twitter chat around this topic. And some of the things that people talked about was not just the physical barriers and infrastructure around inaccessible voting booths or lack of elevators and ramps, but the stereotypes and the bigotry and the kind of ill-informed ideas that the general public and our democracy often has around disabled people, that disabled people are recipients of charity, don't have authority over their own lives and choices, that people often felt like they showed up at places of civic engagement. Civic engagement isn't just for certain people, that it should be for everybody in our democracy. Like, we have this ideal, but then I think when we look critically at that ideal, it becomes a little bit shaky.
Absolutely. Colin, I'm wondering if you can kind of pick up that thread and speak a bit about when it actually comes to making some of those policies and kind of implementing change, kind of where Massachusetts is at relative to other places. Kind of, I think that there's very much a perception in lots of ways across issues that, Massachusetts and especially Boston is like very progressive. And I'm curious from your perspective if that holds true when it comes to disability justice.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And we have this reputation, and in some ways, we're doing well. Right? Massachusetts has one of the most expansive programs in the country in terms of things like access to personal care attendants, right? And durable medical equipment and that kind of thing. It's still not perfect. It's still improvements are needed, but better than most states by a long shot. But on the other hand, right? What was the last neighborhood in the city of Boston to agree to have curb ramps put in? It was Beacon Hill, right? The wealthiest neighborhood in the city fought in court for years to prevent its sidewalks from becoming accessible, out of concern that it would disrupt the historic character of the neighborhood, right? And you wind up with that sort of thing, all over the place. With people with disabilities who are being left out of the conversation. And it happens, really, I think some cases out of overt bigotry, in some cases simply out of omission, out of a presumption that Massachusetts must be progressive, and so we don't need to think about these things. And sometimes we actually see overt bigotry in Massachusetts policymaking against people with disabilities, that wouldn't fly in other states. And I think the most egregious instance of this we saw during COVID was the state's crisis standards of care, right? Where, as we moved toward the height of the pandemic, when it looked like we might have to ration access to things like ventilators and hospital beds, the state adopted standards which said, if you have a disability which would limit your life expectancy, not your probability of surviving COVID, but your life expectancy for unrelated reasons. If you have diabetes or heart disease or cancer or what have you, you go to the back of the line for life-saving care. Having a disability reduced your odds of being given life-saving care because, in their opinion, your life was worth less. Now, this happened all over the country, and we weren't the worst state. Alabama was literally saying if you have an intellectual disability, you won't be admitted to an emergency room at all while their crisis standards were in effect. But nonetheless, open, overt discrimination against us. And we've also seen proposals to price prescription drugs in this state based on metrics like quality adjusted life years that are based explicitly on the presumption that the lives of people with disabilities are inherently less worth living than those of people without disabilities. Whereas on the other hand, Oklahoma, right, a red state if ever there was one, has banned that exact metric because it is discriminatory against people with disabilities. So we actually have another piece of legislation that we have introduced this session that would address both of those. We led the legislative campaign that overturned those crisis standards of care and put new standards in place that included disability civil rights protections, but those will only apply for the duration of this pandemic. So we've created new legislation, which is H 1256 and S 745. An act relative to preventing discrimination against persons with disabilities in the provision of health care. And what that would do is it would establish in-state anti-discrimination law that whether it is the state as a whole doing it or an individual doctor doing it, that it is discriminatory and unlawful to deny someone treatment or deprioritize them for treatment, either because they have a disability or based on a presumption that because of a disability, they have inherently lower quality of life.
I want to pick up a little bit to kind of close out on the COVID-19 thread. And as you mentioned, both of you, that there's certain things that have become more accessible via the pandemic because things are being live streamed or we're, doing things digitally in ways that we didn't do previously. And I think I'm interested in the conversation that's been happening around how many of those things are going to continue beyond the pandemic, and like what of those things are people considering just like, like we're putting a Band-Aid on something, but then we're going to like leave it in the past. And I wonder if you can each kind of briefly speak to what that dynamic has been like for you throughout the pandemic, and what do you hope in terms of how accessibility has looked during this COVID-19 moment. What do you hope we do kind of culturally move forward and take into the next era once this pandemic has ended? Sandy, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I guess I'll answer this by sharing that one of the data points in the report was that 57% of people with disabilities who responded to the survey said that they experience inaccessibility as a barrier to civic engagement. So that is not just about structural barriers, but as Colin was just alluding to and sharing about the social stigma that contributes to these ableist medicalized ideas. And I think that the reasons why this is important is because, sometimes when people engage with the disability community, their minds go straight to the Americans with Disabilities Act and how wide should the doors be, and how tall should the bathroom and toilet be, and whatnot. But what the pandemic really threw our entire world and country and state into is this really further exploration and really pushing beyond what is access, beyond ramps and elevators, and what does it mean to not have access to something when it's because we're suddenly not going to provide remote work as a form of accessible employment, or I've seen and have been a part of the ways that state legislatures have now allowed remote streaming of their sessions, and how that has broadened and expanded the ways people have been able to participate in the conversations where they haven't necessarily been able to before. And so, the sort of simple point blank answer would be everything should have remote virtual access in some way. Like that would be the ideal. And when people talk about this sort of quote unquote going back to the norm, or this is the new normal, I think for many disabled people, for many people who are chronically ill, are bedbound, for whatever reasons, this new normal that we are now just getting used to has been their life experience. Like this is the ways that many disabled people in our community, many of our friends, many of our activist friends, this is how we've interacted and still gotten things done.
It is frustrating that the kinds of accommodations that disabled workers have been asking for generations, and disabled people in terms of civic participation, I've seen huge increases in participation from our community in things like legislative hearings now that they're virtual. And I think that we're at a crossroads now, really. Society could try to just go back to things the way they always were, to work being in person, to legislative hearings only being in person, right? To trimming these kinds of things down. I think folks are in for a rude awakening if they try to do that, though, because the language of the ADA says you must make reasonable accommodations, right? And it will get awfully difficult to argue that something is not a reasonable accommodation to provide if you were providing it for everybody for the entirety of 2020 and 2021. There is also another path, and it's one I'm excited about, frankly. And it's one that actually I think would be an adjustment for our community too, but it was for society to change the way it thinks about accommodation. I think changing it from being something for a narrow slice of disabled people, while the rest of the world did things in the standard way, the status quo way, and instead it being something that was available to everyone, right? Where anyone could say, I need to continue working from home, not only because they have a disability, but because perhaps they have small children who they need to be there for, or because they would have a difficult commute, or one of any number of things. What if we built a society in which everyone was encouraged to think about, well, what accommodations would help you go to school better, do your job better? And what might that mean for our community if we were viewed not as the exception, right? Not as requiring, having special needs, which, good God, I hate that term, but rather if as a society we began to embrace the idea that the status quo ought to be modified, that accommodations ought to be made for anyone, and people ought to be able to work and be educated and participate civically in whatever way works best for them. And I think that would be great for our community and great for society as a whole.
Absolutely echo all of what you just said, and I think that that's a great place to end on, that sort of moment of visioning out, thinking about what we could be and what we can take from this moment. I want to take a second to just say thank you both so much for joining us. It has been great to chat. I feel like we could do a whole 2 more hours on this topic. There's really so much to say. And I look forward to, having you back at another Company One event sometime so we can dig into some more stuff, because it's been great to talk.
The Age of Voting by Dr. Maru Colbert and Alicia Margarita Olivo. It's election day in Boston. Outside of the local senior center, Jules and Morgan wait in line to vote. Jules, as an elder, goes near the front of the line.
Age before beauty. That's why they moved me to the front of the line.
Oh, come on. You are beautiful. Wait, I know you. Aren't you usually on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I used to sit right there. Did that for the past 8 years, ever since I retired. Another level of civic participation erased due to 5 letters and a number.
Wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. First, this pandemic is stripping us of our lifestyle, and then certain racist legislators and politicians are trying to strip us of our voting rights.
Can I get a woo-woo or some pizza? Can I? Luckily, there hasn't been legislation passed here disallowing bringing food to voters in the line. However, you don't need a line for there to be food scarcity. It is a problem for certain seniors.
I could use some Whataburger myself right now. Speaking of food shortages, the pandemic highlighted the problem among many students and working adults. I'm voting for the candidate who has had this focus as an issue.
Voting is so important and a hard-fought right. Standing in line for a candidate who will work to solve some of the most pressing problems is important. Even aching feet shouldn't stop anyone. If I could do it my age, anyone can.
Yes, I completely agree. It seems as if people are finally realizing that their vote does make a difference. Boston has issues: economic inequality, the extreme lack of affordable housing, and too many underperforming public schools, despite the fact that it's in a collegiate haven. We have to line up for a mayor who understands and will make progress solving these problems. I think some folks I know are apathetic about voting because of the legislation or lack thereof that some politicians have passed. I know my own parents thought that way for sure. But now people are realizing that the most important politics are local. Oh, and can we add police reform, please?
Yes! How soon folks forget. In the Boston City Council at Large race in 2019, Julia Mejia won by a single vote after that 3-day count. This time, she decided not to run for mayor. She's running for re-election.
Wow, even I forgot. As sure as I am standing here waiting to vote, that should have been a lesson learned.
Yes. You know, at times, life is stranger than fiction. You can't make this stuff up.
If everyone knew this outcome, I think it would help motivate more people to pay attention to local races and go out and vote. I'm definitely going to start telling more hesitant relatives and friends that their apathy can cost you. After all, politicians serve us and we get to pick them. If we want to change, then we have to vote. The sooner we do, we'll begin to see the change in action.
The talking stops as a siren goes by.
Oh, look, the line's starting to move more. Finally, we'll be inside in a minute. You know, it's warm for November though. Standing out here wasn't so bad.
Soon enough, we'll be there. Soon enough, we'll be in there voting ourselves. At last, I hear Edda's song in my ears.
Hello, it's great to see you here voting, folks. Do any of you seniors up front need any additional assistance while you wait in line?
No, thank you. I'm doing okay so far. This cane turns into a little seat rest if I need it. I was just telling
Morgan.
Morgan, nice to know your name after talking to you this long. I'm Jules. If it wasn't for this 5-letter word and a number, I'd be sitting in the chair where you are. That little $150 came in handy.
Wow. This pandemic discriminates on basis of age and economics.
Even though we want it to be over, I know many seniors still don't feel comfortable interacting with so many people inside or outside for that matter.
I'm the head of the student political committee at my university. The minute I could vote or participate in any way, I did. I have to get back to the table, but I'll see you both soon.
Speaking of importance, seniors really value the vote. In 2012, 72% of us over 65 voted. That's almost a full 3/4 of the entire senior population in the US. We seniors have political clout. I know we'll be out today for this mayor's race. It's one of the most diverse in history. It's almost certain we'll have the first elected female mayor of Boston.
That is progress.
I hope there is progression towards a new Boston. The COVID-19 scare in nursing homes revealed the substandard care that is prevalent in most of them. If veterans are mistreated, what in the world happens in homes full of regular folks?
Hello again.
Jules and Morgan have arrived to the poll worker table. Poll coworkers check their ID, confirm that they're at the correct voting location, and get the ballot. Jules and Morgan are directed to their respective private voting poll machines to vote. After a few minutes, they both leave the voting area. During a break, Sam waits by the exit door leading outside to get some fresh air through the open door.
Thank you for completing your civic duty. It's good to see more voter turnout, and that's considering we still have until the rest of the day to see more folks come in. I mean, who knows how many people will show up?
You know, I just want to tell you that it's great to see young folks such as you volunteering. A lot of us just don't feel comfortable signing up to work. You just never know. It gives me hope for our future to see how engaged young folks can be.
Of course, it's my right and my duty. I finally come of age. Actually, it felt good to tell others this is what I'll be doing today. Some of our friends couldn't imagine spending the whole day at the polls, but I know I'll sleep better at night knowing I did my part.
Once you get in there, the actual voting is quick. It was certainly worth the wait.
I remember voting for the first time. I realized how the worst part of the voting is the waiting part. The voting itself is smooth sailing.
You know who I think of when I go to vote? 102 years old Beatrice. She certainly keeps me going. The newscast showed the hazmat suit she wore to vote in the last election. That lady has voted in every election since 1940. She has definitely done her part and has been an incredible role model, even for us younger seniors.
I remember the mayor of San Antonio telling a 106-year-old woman named Sara Muniz that she was his hero as she voted. They are definitely some civic-minded seniors who put some of us to shame. After seeing her, no excuses allowed.
During the last election, I was glued to the TV.
Same.
I remember seeing a woman named Ruth, whose father died in the 1918-1920 pandemic, showing up to vote. She was a New Yorker. Hillary Clinton praised her example.
I think about the seniors who weren't well enough to come out. Luckily, some of the churches in Roxbury and Dorchester are getting seniors to the polls all day.
My niece is 54 and in a wheelchair. Voting is important to her, but doing it in person depends on her caretaker and the weather. She's taking the church bus because the ride isn't dependable on voting days. Speaking of which, my ride will be here soon.
Well, we've done what we can. Our votes are in. Hopefully, some form of rent control will be restored. The criminal justice system is rotten to the core for us. And $8 to $247,500. Really? What is that? And we built this country. And the school system, first there was the normal achievement gap, and then the pandemic gap. Public transportation doesn't serve the public. And did I mention affordable housing?
That new mayor will have their hands full. I am one of the lucky ones. I bought low and sold high. A 2019 study reported that Massachusetts is the worst state for elder economic security in the nation. Check out my ride. Again, I'm one of the lucky ones.
A royal blue and white striped car pulls up.
Whoa, that car is a classic. Is that your caretaker driving that Chevrolet? It is in great shape. I'm a car person, and that is an awesome ride.
It's a great shape like its owner. You see? It was good talking to you, young'un. Yes, you're still young. Wait until you pass 70. Everyone under 50 is young. That young lady sings, "These hips don't lie," and mine are starting to let me know that I've been here a while. You take good care and keep voting.
Trailblazers like yourself keep me motivated. Believe it or not, I aspire to be in the Senate one day. And I'm hoping that things get better and I don't have to fly to DC because some people have a Jim Crow attitude.
Jules's caretaker and Morgan get her into the car. As the door is closed, Jules waves goodbye.
We were all in line masked up, as if we were waiting to rob a bank. Just think, there are politicians across the nation trying to rob us of our vote. Keep strong. Keep up the fight. You'll be here long after I'm gone. Have a blessed day.
You too. You remind me of my great aunt. She was a strong woman and a great person. Let us hope that the best people get elected. As Jesse would say, keep hope alive.
End of play.
Hi, my name is Summer L. Williams. I use she and her pronouns, and I am the Associate Artistic Director here at Company One Theater, as well as a co-founder. Our final conversation of the evening is with Edna Preuss, President of Massachusetts Senior Action Council. We spoke about the issues that mattered most to Boston's elder communities. We talked about Edna's life story and how her story influenced her mission of advocacy and activism. Enjoy.
I spent the first 11 years of my life with my grandfather, who was born in slavery in Maryland. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, where everything was segregated: housing, schools, theaters, lunch counters. It was a totally segregated city, as was the state. So of course, my grandfather, who had been born a slave, became a landscape gardener, and he did gardens for rich white folks. And through this, he became very prosperous. And so I grew up in a house which one of his people that he worked for arranged the sale for, because Black people couldn't buy property then. So I really know what segregation was about. And I was refused by every nursing school that I applied to in the state because of the color of my skin. And so I ended up going to Freedman's Hospital School of Nursing in Washington, DC, affiliated with Howard University. I joined the Air Force Nurses Corps, and I went for my basic training at the time of the Montgomery bus boycott, becoming aware of the very blatant segregation policies, and having grown up with them, it certainly colored my life in terms of wanting to be empowered. But the other side of my story is that my mother's parents were freemen, and in the 20s, my maternal grandfather educated his two sons by sending them to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
And my two daughters, one of which was my mother, who he sent to Wilberforce College in Ohio. And it is through the influence of my mother's folks that I became very much aware of the importance of voting and the importance of collective power, the importance of speaking up and speaking out. And so that side of the family, always, having been raised in Virginia, having been aware during my time as well of the fact that people died trying to vote, being aware of the poll tax, being aware of the march in Selma, where so many people were battered and beaten, and it was called Bloody Sunday because they were marching to have access to the vote, which was not passed, the Voting Rights Bill, until 1965. That is amazing. So I felt very keenly the lack of racial justice and the problems that Black people were having in trying to get the vote.
What a start, Miss Edna. What a start.
Wow.
I would love for you to just take a moment and introduce yourself and say a little bit about your work with the Mass Senior Action Council.
Okay, let me say what sort of led me up to that.
Yes.
Was the fact that I moved to Boston from England. I married and lived in England and moved to Boston. And when I moved to Boston, I became very involved with the Black Political Task Force, which a man named John O'Brien, Mel King, Doris Bunty, all of them were involved with, where we saw how important it was for people to become involved politically for their political rights. And I also was a member of the Unitarian Universalist Black Caucus, which was able to persuade the church to donate funds to empowering organizations. So I have always been aware of the importance of empowerment and collective activity. With Mass Senior Action, I became aware of that through a health forum. And its mission is to ensure the voice of seniors is included when decisions about us and the community are made. And it comprises elderly, senior citizens. It's a democratic grassroots organizations run by seniors who advocate for and work for issues that improve the well-being of the most vulnerable amongst us. But the important thing is that it is committed to empowering people to take action.
Yes.
And people can see the results of their empowerment in taking actions. They are, encouraged to continue to work so hard. Voting is the main strategy we use to build power with decision makers. And for 40 years, Mass Senior Action preserved subsidized housing from going to market rate, lowered the cost of health care for seniors, secured transportation, and pushed for funding to allow seniors to live in their homes instead of being forced into nursing homes or institutions. And these victories just did not happen. We built it on collective power in the community. And it all begins by educating seniors on the importance of voting and using their voices at the polls. The reason I became so involved, they formed a committee where we wanted to influence the legislators to act to increase the Medicare savings program, which was for seniors. And so what we did is we strategized, we found out what we needed to do. We got allies, we recruited allies from other organizations. We targeted the politicians, the legislators who we felt were most friendly and gave them the facts because the facts were overwhelming. And we went from ground zero in 4 years of getting legislation passed to increase the number of people eligible for Medicare savings. And we increased it from 35 to 65%. We're going for 200% in September.
Okay.
But not enough can be said about the power of collective power, organizing collectively.
Fantastic.
And being clear about the goal that you're going after.
Thank you so much. That is, I mean, at Company One Theater, one of the reasons why we are doing this is to create collective action around all of these issues that are facing our community, facing the city of Boston, and giving us an opportunity to make sure that we are saying, pay attention to this, don't neglect that, to make sure we all get to that good place together. Thank you so much, Miss Edna, for your time. You are an extraordinary woman and a full force. I want to be around your energy all the time.
No, but I will say that I have been so impressed by the fact that collectively these, and we're across the state, that the legislators know us now with our blue shirts. I wore a blue shirt specifically for you to see it.
Nice.
And They know us now. They know that we come prepared. They know that we have our facts, and they know we don't give up.
That's right. That's right.
If you act collectively, the legislators and political forces do notice.
Thank you so much, Miss Edna. That's a word for all of us. And hopefully we will all be inspired to like carry this message of collective action forward so that we are really thinking about how are the ways that we are going to pull together, especially as we have this mayoral campaign and election season coming up, to make sure that Boston is the Boston we need it to be.
Massachusetts at this moment in time is the most economically insecure, has the largest number of economically insecure seniors in the country. They fell below Mississippi at the end of last year, so that they're almost 4 to 6% of your seniors here cannot meet basic needs because of the cost of medical care. And the high cost of living in Massachusetts.
Wow.
So that is but the other thing is long-term care and prescription costs. And one other thing we were able to do to influence is with the SNAP program, which is the food stamp program, and Mass Health, we were able for applicants, instead of filling out 20 pages for each one of them, to just have a little click off box.
Oh, okay.
If they were wanted to apply for SNAP also, so
Got
that
it.
they wouldn't have a lot of repetitious paperwork. And we've also had liaisons with lowering the cost of prescriptions with interfaith societies, because the cost of prescriptions are so high, and the cost of housing. Seniors who own their homes that they bought years ago can no longer afford the repairs,
That maintenance, yes.
the maintenance problems for seniors who are still living in their homes. And of course, too, the rents for rentals, this is a very expensive city to live in. And this is one of the reasons why nationally seniors appear to be so economically insecure.
Right. That's really sad to hear and not surprising, unfortunately. And it also seems that there are a good number of folks who are maybe like just graduating high school or just graduating college or just joining the workforce who are also in those same positions economically, like not being able to really secure housing, the tension between needing like medical care, probably not being able to earn a living wage in the city. And I don't think we often talk about that those two populations are struggling with the same issues. So why aren't we addressing them if so many of our, a city's people is dealing with housing and food insecurity and access to healthcare? Why aren't those things being addressed 100% of the time?
Well, I guess the other thing too, that there's so many issues, there are a number of issues that if one is going to try to be as effective as possible, they should zero in on one or two that they feel, they can spend the time and the effort and to really bring to the attention to the powers that be.
If there was one issue, I know you just listed a bunch of issues that seniors are really challenged with, but if there was one that you wanted all of us to put all of our energy and might and collective power behind, what would it be?
I think it would be, I'm torn. I think it would be between healthcare needs. And I would imagine that would be for millennials too, the cost of healthcare. And COVID has really done us in. And affordable housing.
Yeah. I do have one more question, and I don't know if this will make the interview or not, but so my grandmother, who is 93, used to work the polls like religiously, right? Like that was, if anyone was voting for anything, she was going to be at those polls. And my recollection and my, like, I guess my feeling about voting is so deeply connected to Black women, because growing up, that's who I saw sort of running the places where I was voting. And that gave me such a great sense of belonging as I transitioned from being a voter with my parents and like going into the booth with them to being 18 and being able to vote. I wonder if there's any either connection or thoughts you have about the ways Black women have shown up in the voting rights struggle.
Well, yeah, I went to the polls and I've gone to the polls, and in fact, I early voted yesterday.
Oh, nice.
And the majority of people there were women. And the majority of women that I have seen working with us, the majority are women. I wouldn't say that's altogether a fair statement since men died earlier than women, but young men. My son, a lot of it also is how people are brought up. And my son knew I was an activist, and his grandfather, who was a simple man with an 8th grade education, but really believed in voting, went to the March on Washington. He was really an activist. And my maternal grandparents and aunts and uncles, they very much, having come from the South Virginia, believed in the importance of voting to try to bring change. That we were surrounded with it. So that when he moved out to California, my son called me and said, "Mom, I want you to know that today I registered to vote. You don't have to call me."
Ms. Edna, I could talk to you literally all day. And I hope we have a chance to talk again, because you have a lot that we could learn and definitely value hearing from.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Edna, and thanks to all the partners and artists who have joined us for a Better Future Voting Rights. You can find more information about the participants in our event via the links in the chat. Throughout the program, you've heard from artists and activists who are working towards a better future. We hope you'll join us in this work, because the only way to do it is together.
And we'd also love you to check out our upcoming PlayLab open circuit programming, free events for writers and new playmakers that bring in accomplished guest artists from around the country for guided conversations and dedicated communal writing time. Sessions occur monthly. Mark your calendar and RSVP in our website.
Please consider making a donation to Company One Theater in order to support our future events as we continue to build community at the intersection of art and social change. To donate, please visit companyone.org/donate. You'll also find that link in our Venmo handle in the description for this video.
Finally, if you are fired up and ready to take action on these issues, please be sure to check out our event page, which is also linked in the video description to find resources and the steps you can take in your community and within your own circles.
Thanks again for joining us to imagine a better future for us all. We'll see you next time.
What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Sun feels like gold on my skin. I win another day to begin with my friends. Chasing the bag with a grin. Are you in? Let's do this for real. Don't pretend it's a better future. It's no surprise. I'm seeing it's all in your eyes. Yeah, we've been glowing real bright. It's a better future. As clear as the sky. I know if you're down to ride, you'll be fine. It's a better future. What's next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Take it in hand, understand it's a goal. You've always been there and prepared for the show. You're bright like lights, it's divine when you glow. You remind me to shine, don't you know? It's a better future. It's no surprise, I'm seeing it's all in your eyes. Yeah, they've been glowing real bright. It's a better future. As clear as the sky. I know if you're down to ride, you'll be fine. It's a better future. What's next? 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 What's next?